And as we do every PM meeting on the first Tuesday of each month, we have our citizen forum where anyone can come and speak on anything that's not on the agenda. We have 3 public hearings tonight, so if you're here to talk about anything that's on the agenda related to the public hearings, please wait and come and speak during the public hearings that we have for those issues. We ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes during the citizen forum, and give us your name and the magisterial district that you live in. And with that, we have 2 signed up, and I'm going to go ahead and open the citizen forum. And we have 2 signed up. I'm going to call those 2, and then anybody else that wants to come and speak can raise their hand, and I will call on you to come up then. First up is Robert Legg.
Congratulate the gentleman on his recent graduation from Culpeper Drug Court. There was a nice write-up in the local paper about it. For the last 2 years, I've been writing a weekly newsletter on drug policy, and I've seen literally hundreds of similar heartwarming news stories about drug court graduation, almost always exactly like that one. Stories that question the efficacy of drug court just don't happen. That takes a lot more work for busy reporters. But I wanted to comment about the board's drug court proclamation. I understand it was from a template, but when you proclaim that it's saving money, you should be able to point to that in this year's budget, not that it's supposedly saving money in Iowa. The 2022 Virginia Drug Court report says each graduate saves $19,000 over traditional costs. I first thought that that was just about the drug court cost versus jail, but it cites vague terms like outcome and future victimization. What's more, this formula was made in 2012, but worst of all, it doesn't even include the costs of those who don't graduate. And there have been 4 non-graduates in Culpeper who no longer are in the program. It's murky math at best. So what happens to the majority who drop out or who are removed? I called the Executive Secretary's office of the Virginia Supreme Court that issues the annual drug court report. I was told, I don't know. I was told essentially the same thing about the 4 former Culpeper drug court participants. Making it less onerous might help. The Culpeper drug court grad had to go to 30 court appearances, not to mention all the other unscheduled mandatory meetings that are very disruptive to any trying to achieve recovery. Drug court has been touted as saving lives, and treatment is better than jail. Most people who are charged with drug possession serve little or no jail. If all these drug court non-grads go to jail, that makes it appear that people are more likely to serve jail time than those who negotiate a plea with the prosecutor. I still think this board genuinely wants to save lives, but there are better ways to do it. Number 1, get the school board to show the fentanyl awareness video to students I recently sent to the superintendent. Number 2, don't wait for someone to be charged with a lifetime felony to initiate treatment. Incentivize treatment with some of that $250,000. Start a needle exchange program. People who use such services are 5 times more likely to seek treatment. Urge the 911 operators to give people calling about an overdose the option of only having EMS and not police come. Too many people are afraid to call until it's too late. So does that mean my time is up? Okay.
Yeah, just go ahead and wrap it. Thank you, sir. Okay, next up is Monica Chernin.
3 minutes goes really fast here. I'm Monica Chernin. Good evening to all of you. Some of you know me, and so you know what I do professionally in this community. Culpeper seems to be a bit of a microcosm of the entire United States these days. I spend a lot of my time working in the criminal justice system. The sheriff, as you all know, is a key player in that system. And as much as there's been a dark cloud hovering over us because of the rumors that are circulating, it seems that our local sheriff has gone dark also. He's gone AWOL. We haven't seen him. He's not appeared in court for anything. He's just appearing to not be around. I have been posting things on Facebook fairly regularly, and a lot of people are commenting and wondering what the status is of our sheriff and what the Board of Supervisors' position is regarding delving into this and getting some information for the community. We're all aware that there have been FBI vehicles driving through town. There have been FBI helicopters hovering overhead. We know that the sheriff's personal phone was wiretapped. We've had different news channels here. I have friends that live all up and down the East Coast that call me and say, what the heck is going on in your little county? And that's what we want to know. What is going on in our county? All we've heard from the Board of Supervisors has been no comment. We have nothing to say. So my question really is to all of you, what will it take to get more than no comment? We have an election coming up in November, and the community has a right to know before Election Day what is going on.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, anyone else that would like to come and speak? Okay, if not, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and go into the agenda. We have an agenda in front of us. Any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Move to approve.
All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, we have one item of general business for public hearing tonight. The board will hold a public hearing and will discuss and consider establishing a new personal property tax classification for data center equipment and peripherals. And I'll go ahead and turn this over to our County Administrator, John Eggerston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, members of the board. As you're all familiar, we have various classifications for personal property tax, and currently data center equipment is amongst pretty much any other business personal property in terms of the tax rate, which is $3.50. The state code does allow the county to differentiate or create a separate tax classification for computer equipment and peripherals used in a data center. And data center, quote unquote, does have a definition that is outlined in the state code. It's a lengthy definition, but that is the code we're looking at potentially adopting tonight. This would be an uncodified ordinance, create this new classification for data center equipment for personal property tax purposes, and then the board has advertised to set the rate. The board advertised a rate of $3.50, which is what the current rate is, so there wouldn't be a change in the rate if you stick with that. By law, you could lower that this evening, but you could not go higher based on what you advertised. So what we have tonight is a need to hold a public hearing and then for the board to determine whether it wants to adopt this uncodified ordinance to set the rate for data center equipment as a separate classification from other business personal property.
Okay, thank you, John. Questions for John, comments before we open the public hearing?
I do have one question. The Virginia code, does it have any sunset period like the vehicle classification does?
It does not.
Okay, thank you.
Could I say one clarification thing? I know my mic does not work, so. Thank you. One thing that the board should be aware of is this particular code section 58.1-3506 If you look at subsection B of that, which comes after what the different classifications can be, the governing body of the town or county or whatever, enumerated in sections A, and includes this 40, I think it's 43 that's applicable to this one, can lower the rate if it adopts this, but it can never go above what the general classifications are. So right now, our general classification is $3.50, so we could not make this one $4 in the future. So it can only be at the rate that other classifications are or lower. So I just want to make that clarification so you guys understood that. That's in the code. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, this issue requires a public hearing, so I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing for anyone that would like to come and speak tonight. Okay, seeing none, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing, open it up for discussion or entertain a motion.
I would like to move that we do not consider establishing a new personal property tax classification for data center equipment and peripherals at this time.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
The motion is to not have a separate classification at this time, to just leave it as is.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Further discussion?
Yes, sir. I support and still am an advocate for a separate data center classification rate. I would prefer that the rate be the same as it is, so the $3.50. The reason that I support creating the separate classification is, should it be necessary, it would give the board the flexibility to adjust to conditions. Right now, I don't know that it's necessary. We have had a request from those in economic development to look at doing this. I would like to expand our flexibility while also keeping the rate where it is. So I support $3.50 as the rate, which is what is advertised, still with additional flexibility if needed. And under what circumstance could that be? I don't know, but I do know that this is a separate tax classification with literally hundreds of millions of dollars of personal property that is taxed at this rate. It's large enough to be considered separately. The state allows us to consider it separately. And for us to be able to do so in the future is, as some have said, another tool in the toolbox. So I would like to have that, but if the board wants to hold off, it'll be what it'll be.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for staff, and in light of Supervisor Underwood's comment, that we could bring this back up in the future at any time if we felt the need that it was to need its own separate category. Is that correct? I mean, this is, just because it's not approved tonight doesn't mean we can't bring it back up in the future.
Yes, sir.
Well, I think that's something that needs to be considered potentially in the future. If we get a case or a user that is looking at the competition part from other jurisdictions, because I'm not sure the public that's watching us tonight really understands this whole issue. So to clarify it a little bit, one of our major manufacturing business in Culpeper brings in about $900,000 a year in tax revenue for the county. A data center, and I'll use Amazon as an example, potentially may bring in anywhere from $6 million to $9 million per year in tax revenue. So that revenue feasibly could carry the debt load for 2 or 3 schools per year. Now, as I said in last meeting, we have minimal property in the county on McDevitt Drive that is a place where we want more data centers. We don't want data centers, at least this board right now. I mean, boards change, of course, but this board right now does not want data centers in the rural areas of the county. And I think we proved that by not voting in support of the one recently in Brandy Station. So the areas on McDevitt Drive and Lover's Lane, Wingspread property, and there's some other areas out there that may be feasible as well, that's where we want technology and data centers to be. But, so there's minimal property in Culpeper for a user and an intermediary that's representing a user to come to Culpeper and take advantage of the location that we're in, the fiber that is in place, and potential solar farm that may be built. So that's a good thing. But the other thing is the jurisdictions, the other jurisdictions right now, many of them are lowering what we're talking about here, the personal property rate, in order to recruit the data centers to their jurisdictions to take advantage of the revenue, the tax revenue that's coming in to that jurisdiction potentially going forward, which would be years of, as Supervisor Underwood just said, millions of dollars coming in that could pay for infrastructure, quality of life projects, schools, roads, et cetera. So I want to be clear with that. So to me, I agree with Supervisor Underwood and I agree with Supervisor Bates that I think that we need to have flexibility in case we do need to negotiate at some point going forward from an economic development situation to where we can be in the running for a major data center or complex. But if we're going to go ahead and defer now, and since Supervisor Bates has clarified that we can bring it up at a later date, I'm okay with that in case there's a user that we need to negotiate with in the future. But I wanted to make sure everybody understands what we're talking about up here and what the specifics are from a compensation standpoint for the county and what that compensation could be used for going forward. And to me, it's very important to plan for the future. And we've talked about the tax, our tax rates right now, the lowest, some of the lowest in Virginia. And I know some of us up here may want to see the tax rates increase. I don't know, because it seems to be bringing in more people to Culpeper. And I agree with that too, but there's a lot of people suffering out there still that don't want to see our tax rates increase. And I don't want to see our tax rates increase because nobody wants to pay higher taxes. And that's another way to keep our taxes low. And bringing in revenue and preparing and planning for economic development is very important. So Supervisor Underwood, I agree with you. We need to be flexible. And if we want to defer until we come to that point of a negotiation situation, I'm okay with that.
I'd like to also add, I agree with the fact that it does have an economic point of negotiation. However, we currently have multiple bidding wars on the little property that we have, and the laws of supply and demand basically state the demand will always be there. We are within Northern Virginia. You have Prince William that's filling up, you have Loudoun that's filling up. Fauquier is fighting just as hard as anybody to not have them there as the doors close to the north. We also have Fredericksburg coming from one side, Charlottesville coming from the other. Economic development will always be at Culpeper's doorstep. We have to be careful to the fact of that not all economic development is good economic development. There has to be a diversity. There has to be a limit to what we're willing to do, and we've set that forth with our technology zones. The moment you put this as a separate tax classification is the moment you will have every data center entity coming to us to lobby to lower it. Meanwhile, they're getting the deal of a lifetime by getting property that is 1/4 to 1/10 of what it costs to get it in Prince William, Loudoun, Fairfax, or elsewhere. That's why those counties to the south and east of us are lowering those, because they're too far away from the mecca of technology zones. So I am adamant to the fact that if this rate could never be higher than any other personal property rate, I don't believe that there would be a point in time where I would ever want to separate the classification.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to have to agree with that, and thanks to Ms. Weimer, I didn't know the facts on that you could not raise that rate above any other personal property. And in relation to your comment, I've said from day one, everything in moderation, and I think when we look at a big picture of what we have here in Culpeper County, the rural characteristics, I will not support anything that is going to lead us to turn out like Northern Virginia. And I've said from the beginning, if we had 3 or 4 of these things that would, as you said, help offset the debt load for schools, infrastructure improvements, that's great. But my mindset was when I came in here tonight was maybe we should put this as a separate category. That way we could raise that rate if we had to check up the amount of applications that we had coming to Culpeper. Well, that's not the case. So I totally and wholeheartedly agree with Ms. Gugino on her analysis of this.
And one point of clarification, Ms. Yao gets a lot of the credit for that because she brought it to my attention first, so please let her have that.
Well, with that said, Ms. Yao has also informed me that these counties that are lowering their rate to attract these data centers, that's not working either. So as Ms. Gugino has said, the location of Culpeper County being in that bubble of Northern Virginia, that weighs pretty heavy on why we're getting all these people knocking on our door. So, you know, I don't think that at the rate if we're getting all these applications at the current rate, I don't see why we would have to lower it. So.
Clearly, we're not going to set a separate category tonight, so I'm going to be brief in my remarks and allow us to move on to other things. That said, I didn't want to set a lower rate. I wanted to create a separate category because when you are negotiating, and whatever it may be, and economic development in relative to data centers now is a negotiation, the maximum flexibility that you have allows you to achieve an optimal outcome. You still could do it poorly, you could do it well, but the more ability you have to maneuver, the better the potential outcome. So literally, the goal was to have us have that flexibility while admittedly also sending a signal that yes, we're aware of data centers, and that is another tool that we could adjust. So I'm not going to say that that wasn't there. It certainly was. I'm in favor of data centers. I believe that they are economic positives. And we have, this board determines whether they occur or not in terms of within our locality. If we don't want the flexibility and if we want to send that signal, it is what it is, and I'm glad we at least had the hearing, so thank you.
Okay, any further comments before I call the question? Okay, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign.
Aye.
Okay, 5-1, Ms. Ellis, in favor. Okay. That's true. We're going from data center and technology to chickens. All right, the board will hold a public hearing and will consider adoption of zoning ordinance amendments to facilitate allowing the keeping of chickens with limitations in the R1 residential zoning district. Sam McLaren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, members of the board. We'll stay on chickens for a little bit, but we will actually get back to the data center topic after this. So we will be bouncing around a little bit. For some time, the board and the board's rules committee, as well as the planning commission, has been considering the amending of the zoning ordinance to allow for the keeping of chickens in the R1 or your residential zoning district. Today, that's prohibited. It is considered an agricultural use. Agricultural uses are not allowed as a by right use in the R1 zoning district. They are allowed as a potential conditional use, but the conditional use process does require a rather hefty fee, as well as advertising and a public process. That's not always friendly to something as minor as keeping, a few chickens in your backyard. The Planning Commission did look at it. The Planning Commission ultimately recommended to the board to not amend the ordinance, to leave the ordinance as it is today. The board's Rules Committee has reconsidered that, and what we've advertised tonight for consideration in the public hearing is to allow for the keeping of chickens in the R1 zone, but on a limited capacity. And the limited capacity is written in red there, and this is how the code potentially could be amended to allow for this use. And it would be considered an accessory use, not a primary use for the property, which means that there would need to be a house there or some other primary use that's allowed by right. No person shall keep any rooster. The chickens shall be used for only non-commercial household egg production. Any commercial slaughtering of chickens or selling of eggs on site shall be prohibited. That would be condition number 2. And then number 3, the number of chickens being kept at no time shall not exceed 6 individual birds. That's how it was written, that's how it was been advertised, and that's how it came out of the Rules Committee. Mr. Chairman, just as a background, there have been folks interested over the actually several years. It goes in both directions. A1 and RA, which makes up the majority of the county, 80+% of the county, you can have chickens on your property by right. There's no limitation on how many. Commercial keeping of chickens, we do require a larger setback of at least 150 feet, but that's only on the commercial keeping for poultry houses. R1 is never allowed, the keeping of chickens by right, unless it was already grandfathered and had been there for years. In those cases, we have a few of those around the county. We do not get a lot of complaints either way. Throughout any given year of chickens either being a problem or wanting them either way. But there has been a desire for some people to at least explore this issue again so that they could keep chickens in the residential zoning. And that's where we are tonight. Mr. Chairman, I'll leave it up to you, but if we have any other questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them. Neil, our zoning administrator, does deal with this issue as well as an enforcer of our zoning ordinance altogether. And if he has any comments or questions for him, he can answer those too. So,
Thank you, Sam. Questions? Comments?
I have one. The one thing that we were discussing in the Rules Committee is the fact that the chickens had to be kept confined. And that, I think, got removed with the no closer than 50 feet to any property line. Is there a way to add the confinement back into any of the other?
so coming out of Rules Committee, that my understanding was that was to be stricken, from the ordinance. You certainly could add, an area of confinement or a setback.
Well, I'm not
provision.
saying a setback. I'm just saying they can't be free range. They have to, the chickens themselves have to be confined.
It would need to be worded differently, obviously, than what's written there in letter
Yeah.
C that's been scratched out, but you could keep it
'Cause-
or require an area of confinement.
Because I think that was the main complaint, was the fact that chickens would get into other people's yards and destroy flower beds and whatnot, to the fact that, yeah, you can have them, but you have to keep them in a coop, confined.
Yeah.
in a yard. So,
Okay, anybody else? Okay, this issue requires a public hearing, so I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing for anybody who would like to come and speak.
Good evening. My name's Matthew House. I'm live in the Jeffersonton district. My question is, specifically tell me, what is the R1 zoning district? How many acres are you talking as far as that is in per household?
Well, we don't answer questions, sir.
Oh,
We just listen
okay.
during the public hearing process. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, okay, so I live in the northern part of Culpeper County, and I've got just over 2 acres. So I would ask that you consider that, that maybe you limit it to an acreage size, whereas nobody has a rooster or something like that. Because I'm in more of the rural part of the county, and I don't have any problems with my neighbors, with my chickens. And I can see where in some of these tighter knit neighborhoods where that's a problem if they do have chickens. But I don't have those problems out there. So I can see where a confinement thing in your tighter knit neighborhoods, I can see that would be an issue, with chickens getting in somebody else's property. My chickens don't go in my neighbors' yards. My neighbors don't have any issues with my chickens. Some of my neighbors have chickens. I don't have any issues with their chickens. So I'd ask that you consider that before you penalize the whole county. So rather than penalize the whole county, take care of the people that really had the issue in the more tighter knit neighborhoods. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, anybody else? Okay, if not, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and open it up for discussion or entertain a motion.
Even if we were to adopt this ordinance as written, we would be less chicken-friendly than the town of Culpeper. That is a fact. Personally, I don't like more regulations, and I'm grateful that at least we've got to this point. So I think the Rules Committee, I think everybody that's gotten through the process, and if we adopt the ordinance as advertised, it's not perfect, but it's good, so thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, this topic, I would have never imagined would have garnered as much interest from county citizens as this has. I mean, we can talk about tax rate, we can talk about solar fields, data centers. Nothing stirs people up more than a bunch of chickens. And not to make light of this, and I've had people, when this first came about, that live in R1 nice neighborhoods, as the good gentleman had mentioned. When you have free-range chickens and they see your nice flower border and they're going to head across the yard and they're going to start scratching your yard up your flower borders and making a mess in your nice paved driveway, that's not why people move to R1. That said, since this whole debate has started, I've then had as many, if not more, people contact me back that Culpeper County is an agricultural county, and why can't you have chickens? Well, it is going to be with great reservation that I'm going to support this motion, not a motion, but putting this as a by right use in R1. But I really think that we need to have where they're not free range. These people need to keep the chickens in their yard. And I'm not going to support staff hiring somebody to go around and count chickens and find out if they're roosters or hens. So
Are you advocating a overlay district for chickens?
no, sir, I'm not. Again. But I really do, and as the gentleman has indicated, it's all about good neighbors. I mean, taking care of your livestock, taking care of your property, and having respect for your neighbor's property. As Supervisor Underwood has indicated, the town right now is revisiting their ordinance on doing away with chickens in the town. So, again, we have with no, not to use a dumb saying, but we've got other fish to fry, and we need to get away from the chicken, so let's move on.
I'll move for approval of the ordinance as advertised.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I just have one comment to the gentleman from Jefferson. The R1 zoning district is a minimum lot size of 40,000 square feet, which is just shy of an acre.
And Mr. Chairman, can I, with the, as advertised, are we going to restrict or have them free range, or is it going to be, are they going to be in a pen?
I specifically was saying as advertised, meaning I'm hoping that people will be good neighbors. As Mr. Rosenberger just noted, it's more than 40,000 feet. The gentleman noted that he has 2 acres without his chickens confined. I'm hoping that it'll work as it is, as we've advertised.
That said, I would not support the motion on the floor without having some sort of a fence to keep the chickens from ranging throughout the neighborhood.
Anybody else before I call the question? All right, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Okay, Ms. Ellis, 5-1 in favor. Mr. Bates, not in favor. Okay, moving on. Request by TPC Culpeper LC and TPC Freedom 1 LC to rezone approximately 34.4 acres from RA to L1 light industrial, from rural area to light industrial. And I'll go ahead and ask Neil Drumheller to please read the Planning Commission's recommendation, and for Sam McLaren to introduce the case.
Dear Chairman Deal, the Board of Supervisors will consider a request by TPC Culpeper LC and TPC Freedom 1 LC to rezone approximately 34.4 acres from RA rural area to LI light industrial. The applicant is proposing to use the property as part of a data center per Article 7.1-2-2.5, including an area for electrical substation and associated equipment. The property is located along 799 McDevitt Drive and Route 699 East Chandler Street in the Stevensburg Magisterial District. It's found on Tax Map 41, parcels 106E, 106F, Tax Map 51, parcel 83A6. The board will either affirm or reverse the findings made by the Planning Commission as to whether the general location or approximate location, character, and extent of the proposed substation are substantially in accord with the county's adopted comprehensive plan or part thereof in accordance with Code of Virginia 1950 as amended, Section 15.2-2232. The board is also responsible for making a determination as to the approval or disapproval of the rezoning. The case was considered by the Planning Commission after proper advertising and public hearing held on Wednesday, May 10th, 2023. Planning Commission found that the proposed rezoning request is supportive of the general purposes of promoting health, safety, general welfare of the public, and is substantially in accord with our most current comprehensive plan. Upon motion duly carried, the Planning Commission recommends to the Board of Supervisors by a 6-2 vote that the proposed rezoning request be approved with acceptance of the submitted proffers. The Commission further suggested that the applicant dedicate a small triangular portion of Tax Map 41-106F, separated by East Chandler Street for road improvements. Sincerely, Sanford Reeves, Jr.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, as Neil read, the Planning Commission held a public hearing for this rezoning. This request for potential data center development. The parcels in red that show on the screen in front of you are the parcels that we're considering. It's made up of 3 different parcels, actually. but it's actually larger, part of a larger property that is shaded in gray where it notes Town of Culpeper. Town of Culpeper has recently rezoned a large portion of property to industrial specifically for data center development. This property would be potentially a part of that greater project that has already been rezoned. As Neil read, the Planning Commission did have a public hearing and is recommending approval. Staff had prepared a staff analysis, case analysis for you as well that has been posted on board docs. Data centers in general were identified as an area of importance when we were reviewing the 2023 comprehensive plan that the board recently adopted. There were several goals and action items in each of the several chapters of the comprehensive plan that really address this topic. And I'm just going to share a couple of them just to kind of paint the picture of where staff fell with this request. One goal is to maintain a balanced growth approach that shifts development pressure away from the outlying agricultural rural areas and direct it to the urban services boundary and identified future growth areas. This is identified in both. This is an urban service area and a future growth area is identified in the recently adopted comprehensive plan. To ensure that future data centers, this is a separate goal that's mentioned, to ensure that future data center development does not significantly alter or impact existing rural or residential surroundings while providing suitable areas for data centers close to existing business areas. On the map in front of you, you see a large area of purple. All the purple areas that are shaded on there today are already zoned light industrial. The large gray rectangular squares to the near 29 is an existing data center complex. You have a C-Tech school, you have Germana, and then you have Swift, which is gray shaded, which is also a data technology center there where you see that dashed line. So the area does have area character that supports the proposed future development. The rezoning is located in an area that's shown as industrial in the future land use map, which is also a consideration for the board and was for the Planning Commission as well. And finally, also as mentioned in the comprehensive plan, which references Chapter 12 of the Culpeper County Code, this property is included in the technology zone for taxing purposes. When you look beyond the comprehensive plan, you look at the area character and other planning implications. Impacts typically with data centers are low once the site is constructed. Data centers generally generate significant amounts of traffic during construction, but afterward not much at all compared to other industries. Proposed development is keeping, in staff's opinion, with the future of the area character and is close to the town environs, which leads itself to the industrial zoning that's currently surrounding this property. The applicant has submitted a concept plan that supports their efforts of what they're wanting to do. They've worked with the agencies such as VDOT to determine the entrance locations, which are supported largely by VDOT. Mr. Drumheller read into the record the Planning Commission's recommendation about right-of-way dedication. There's a portion of the property that sits at the intersection of East Chandler Street and McDevitt Drive and then going into Kaiser Road back out to Knowles Mill. Frank Turnage Drive that you see just to the south on the screen, which it will be actually supporting Cloud HQ, which is a current active site plan for additional data centers in this area, will be realigned potentially to East Chandler Street. That being said, we know that there may be need for the future for intersection improvements at East Chandler and McDevitt. The applicant has amended their proffer statement that has been advertised and is part of the board docs package for review tonight to dedicate to the county that green triangle that sits in the middle of the right-of-way there. That would greatly benefit any future road improvements that would be needed for that intersection in the future. Could be a roundabout like what you're looking at Route 3 and McDevitt further to the west that's already on the books and slated to begin within 2 years. That being said, VDOT did look at it again most recently and believes that there may be a small additional triangle area to the southwest corner of the applicant's proposed project. And the applicant can speak further to this tonight, but I believe they are willing to reserve that area on any future site plan if the rezoning is to go forward. Mr. Chairman, I think I've touched on most of the major issues. One last thing I did want to mention is the applicant, as I mentioned just now with the transportation issues, has amended their proffer statement. But they did actually add a couple other considerations after the Planning Commission's recommendation from last month. Under Design Proffer 3.4, the applicant has amended the proposed perimeter landscaping, and they've submitted a concept plan that supports that. The applicant states that a tree preservation plan will be provided with the final site plan. Under Design Proffer 3.8, the applicant has now included a statement that security fencing for the data center campus shall not be constructed of barbed wire, chain link, or vinyl fencing. And then a substantial change to the proffer amendment was a new section, number 8, which is a contribution to the Fire and Rescue Association. The applicant, in recognition of emergency service needs, has added a new section that offers a monetary contribution to the board in the amount of 23 cents per square foot, constructed to be used specifically for the Culpeper County Volunteer Fire and Rescue Association. And that contribution would be paid as written today as a precondition to the issuance of any certificate of occupancy for each building that is constructed. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions. The applicant has prepared a presentation as well, and we can get to that. Mr. Cook, and there are other representatives for the applicant as well.
Okay, Mr. Cook, would you all like to come up and address the board?
Well, Sam is always a joy to work with, so he has covered just about everything we're going to talk about in our presentation. But thank you for allowing us to come tonight. And Chairman Deal and members of the board, for the record, my name is Marion Harders. I'm a use planner with the law firm Walsh, Colucci, Lubelai, and Walsh. I'm here tonight with, as we've already indicated, Adam Cook, who's with the Peterson Companies. Tucker Travis, who is with our civil engineer, and Kevin Sitzman is our transportation consultant. As Sam indicated, we're here tonight to discuss the rezoning of the RA rural area of the property to the light industrial to allow a data center use. Let's see if I get this right. Okay. So, as Sam described, the site is located on the west side of McNevitt Drive and consists of 3 parcels containing 34.4 acres shown in the red outlined area. As noted in staff's case analysis and review, the comprehensive plan designates the subject property as industrial on the future land use map. It is located in the urban services boundary, and it is also part of the Bragg's Corner Eastern Business Area and is located in the McNevitt Drive Technology Zone. This slide provides a graphic representation of the current zoning, the RA and the LI on the left side of the screen, and the proposed zoning to the LI light industrial. As Sam indicated, you can see where this will provide a seamless, uniform zoning to the LI that is basically surrounding the entire property. And also, as Sam indicated in staff notes, the proposed development is in keeping with the future character of the area and the location, close to the town environs. It lends itself to industrial zoning and is arguably prevents unwanted development in more rural areas of the county. So it feels like a very ideal location for the data center use. Also, as Sam indicated, it's a little bit hard to see, but this is a contextual plan of the entire town area as well as the county. Obviously, everything to the left of the red line is located within the town. And you can vaguely see the outlines of buildings and a site plan of the data center proposed in the town, which was approved earlier this year by the town. It's 115 acres there to the west. So if we go to the next slide here, we'll zoom in onto the county area. And what we see there is that this property is going to mainly maintain or contain services to the larger data center development. And I don't know if this has a, whoops, I was trying to get a,
I think, Marion, if you hold that button down, you can get that red arrow to pop up, hopefully.
okay, let me see if I can go back.
Maybe not.
Oh, I am so sorry. Will it go backwards? I'm clock here. If you could go to slide,
There you go.
it's only going, which one are you pressing?
The bottom.
That one? Okay.
And then
There we go.
the pointer
Ah,
is the top button.
great, thank you. All right, so the development area within the county is the, you'll see the site entrance, which has been relocated based on comments from VDOT. The initial, geez, sorry about that. The initial application had the entrance located farther down onto the south on McDevitt Drive. VDOT encouraged us to relocate it here, so we have done that, and that's the zoning plan that you have in front of you tonight. Also within the county property is the generator yard that will service the building that is just on the other side of the town property line. And then we have the 50-foot perimeter buffer, which runs the entire length of McDevitt Drive and along the county property line along this area here. Along East Chandler is a 40-foot building foot restriction line that will have the VDOT transmission line as well as potential future right-of-way that we'll get to in just a moment. Line of sights were also an important thing for the Planning Commission to review, and the applicant prepared actually an additional line of sight based on input from the Planning Commission. First was the line of sight from McDevitt Drive to the building area itself. You can see the line of sight is taken from just south of the main entrance line. And what you'll see here is about 312 feet of separation from McDevitt Drive back to the generator yard. And within this area is the 50-foot perimeter buffer, the main entrance road, and about 182 feet before you hit the security fence, which is identified right here. So there is no, right now, there is no planned building in the town, or within the county property, and it's all just on the other side, the western side of the property, the town-county property line. Moving to the next line of sight, it's from East Chandler Street to the substation area. And with respect to the proposed substation, we'd note that the corner, this location is not within the entrance corridor overlay district, and therefore it is not subject to Article 30. However, the applicant again understands the view concerns at this intersection, and this line of sight shows, if you're viewing it from Candler back towards the southern portion of the substation area, we have approximately 119 feet from East Candler Drive, and it will contain the 40-foot building restriction line as well as the VEPCO easement. But based on the line of sight that is provided here below, you will see that the visibility to the transmission, the substation will be very minimal, if at all. Similarly, the Planning Commission did ask for this additional line of sight, which is from McDevitt Drive back to the substation. Our engineer has provided it with the closest pinch point from the potential substation to the road to give you a sense of what this view at its closest point would be. And let me get my distances here. That distance is approximately 82 feet from the edge of pavement, but at its widest point, you can see back here, back towards the corner of the property, the intersection itself is over approximately 264 feet. So there's a variable width between the proposed substation and the roadway itself. Again, in the graphic below, we see that the visibility is minimal to non-existent. Sam also touched on all of the recommended changes based on the Planning Commission, but two that we do want to touch on and show you in full text is the contribution to fire and rescue service, which is proffer 8.1. It was very clear that it was important to cover and make sure our contribution covered both the town and any proposed development within the county. So the applicant, we went back and rewrote this proffer to include a 23 cent per gross square foot of building constructed within the project area to be to be paid prior to the issuance of the occupancy permit. Right now, that overall contextual plan showed 2,080,000 square feet of potential building area, which gives a potential contribution of $478,000 for fire and rescue services. The other important, or we thought was a very important add to the proffers was the dedication of land for the right-of-way for the construction of a potential roundabout at East Camp Chandler and McDevitt Drive. Here you see, this was actually just provided to us this morning. We have not, this is a very preliminary roundabout sketch prepared by VDOT. It is something that we can see that our right-of-way dedication that we have currently proffered in proffer 2.2 is generally this triangular area right here. It's about 0.41 acres. That is already committed to in the proffers for the right-of-way dedication. With now viewing this preliminary sketch, we do see that there is potential additional right-of-way that may be needed on this southern portion of the property here. The applicant is more than willing to continue the discussions with VDOT and the county with respect to any additional right-of-way needs that are there. And as Sam indicated, we can address this at site plan. It was too late to provide that proffer because we just found out about potential additional needs this morning. So, we are more than willing to continue that dialogue after this is hopefully approved by you tonight. VDOT comments, I'll just quickly run through those. The traffic study is currently being conducted, and our transportation engineer is here tonight. If you have any specific comments or questions about that, it's in the final stages of being prepared, and it will be submitted when the site plan is submitted. The traffic study is going to be studying Route 3 in the McDevitt intersection, McDevitt and East Chandler, and McDevitt and Knowles Mill. Preliminary analysis so far shows that there is no significant impact on the roadways. Entrance location, we've already touched on that. VDOT suggested that we relocate that entrance, and we have done that, and we are utilizing the existing entrance, the median break, and left turn area there. With this relocated entrance, we are now meeting the design standards and requirements of VDOT. Turn lane warrant analysis and turn lane assessments are also being reviewed right now. And again, our transportation engineer can answer any questions with that. But at this point, there are no additional needs or warrants for turn lanes at the site. Culpeper Soil and Water Conservation District had a few comments. Most of these are related to things that would be discussed during the site plan review process. We are, with respect to the buffer, we are providing the 50-foot perimeter buffer. Where feasible, it will be wider, and we will have tree save in certain areas. On the next slide, we have a preliminary idea of where some of that tree save or undisturbed area will be, and we'll look at that in just a second. Invasive plants and invasive plant species removal plan will be provided at site plan, riparian buffers and setbacks. All of the required permits will be obtained obviously at site plan. With the relocation, there is maybe a little bit of a pinch point with one of the wetlands at the relocated site entrance. So that is probably our only area that we may have to provide and pull state and federal permits for that wetlands disturbance. Stormwater management, all of that will be provided at site plan, DEQ review, and the master soil and erosion plans as well. Again, noting that the data center buildings, most of them, if not all, or all of them, are located within the town of Culpeper, and any kind of phasing will be coordinated with both. If there is required phasing, it will be with the town and the county together. Here's the potential tree saved undisturbed area graphic that we have. Again, it shows our engineers have gone out to look at potential areas, and these are the light green are the conceptual undisturbed areas, and the darker green would show some potential tree save areas that will probably be reflected on our site plan. I'm going to turn it over now to Adam, who's going to run through the responsible design aspects of our project. We feel like the data centers, and particularly Adam's exposure to data centers he can bring and fill you in on some of the things that maybe give pause to data centers and why we feel like this, in this particular case, and especially in this area, which is not adjacent to any residential, is probably a good fit. So, Adam?
Good evening. My name is Adam Cook. I'm with the Peterson Companies. Just a couple quick notes. I know everyone can read what's on the screen, but we try to be good stewards, both in what we develop, but also from an educational standpoint on what we think is the best way to develop and lessons learned from people who've done it previously and maybe to do it the way we would all do it today. But as a part of that, 100% of our data center portfolio through tenants and partners is based on renewable energy. So that's both for all current and future planned locations. I will add a footnote that none of that comes from any planned solar farms in Culpeper. We also, and this is a really important thing that is overlooked in data centers. A lot of people talk about the sound generated from data centers and their concerns about that. And we get a lot of questions about generators. Well, a generator runs about 15 minutes a month in a test. So that's not where the sound concerns that people have. The sound concerns really come from the cooling and exhaust systems on the buildings. Our data center standard of design has a closed loop system, which means those huge giant fan boxes that can be 12, sometimes 15 feet tall and sit on top of data centers don't exist. Those are the mechanical devices, the spinning of those fans to create the exhaust and blow the steam. That's what generates, and it's not even really the decibel so much as it is the frequency of the sound that people have voice complaints about. Because of that, our system completely eliminates those systems, and we used a closed loop cooling system. The other benefit of that is that it reduces the water consumption by greater than 99%. So I'm sure you also hear about data centers being big water hogs, and a traditional, rooftop cooled system is that. You might ask, well, why doesn't everyone do this? And the answer is it's more expensive to maintain. It's a much more expensive system on our end from an operating side, but it reduces those impacts both in terms of sound and water consumption on a community. So we think it's the responsible thing to do. And frankly, I think it's the only real solution that works for a community like this. So that's why we've opted to do that. We do have fully on-site stormwater management in the form of a stormwater management pond. We do have a large stream running through our development. It's predominantly in the town, but it's completely untouched by our development plans, so that runoff and the quality of that stream is unaffected. You've heard my colleague here speak extensively about our buffer landscaping, but as a part of that strategy, we also identify, catalog, and have a program to manage and remove invasive species while focusing on maintaining as much existing plant coverage as possible, and where needed for visual screening to uphold our proffered buffer, we'll be replacing it with indigenous drought-resistant species that are native to Virginia and the surrounding areas. And then I think another key, we just don't have residential development surrounding this. I know that can create conflict in communities when those things do exist side by side. Thank you.
And that does end our presentation. We're happy to answer any questions that you might have for any of us here. Ready?
Okay, thank you.
You're
And
welcome.
open it up for questions and comments.
Okay, I do have some questions. The first one, and I don't think it was adequately answered in the Planning Commission either, was the need for the two substations. You have one in the back of the property, and then you have one right there on East Chandler and McDevitt corner, which at some point is going to be the entrance to our CTEC, which is a very frequented by guests for tours, and I know that you guys have stated that, you're not gonna be able to see it, but I look at that hill every day and I find it hard to believe that you're gonna excavate all of it off.
I think I'll leave it to our civil engineer to answer the amount of dirt we're moving, because he probably knows the count better than I do, but I know it's over 1 million cubic yards, if I'm correct.
We're going to be moving dirt quite a bit.
But yeah, so the real answer, and we did talk about this in the planning commission, is I would like to not build the substation where it's shown at that intersection. We currently have a power commitment from Dominion to energize the facility via the acreage reserved on the west side of the development in the town by Q1 of 2026. So we have a firm contractual commitment with them to bring power there. That will be sufficient for the entire development. In short, we do not need to put a substation there. And the goal there, we're actually collaborating with our neighbors to the north, Jim and Stephen, who are present this evening. It's likely that that land is frankly more beneficial to their aspirations than it is to ours. And we're in ongoing conversations about what it would look like if they developed it rather than we were developing it. But currently, that area, because it is in the county, is served by Rappahannock, and we have no ongoing or open conversation to do that there. Frankly, with that acreage alone, it's not really sufficient to do a data center on, so we kind of drew that before we knew that the acreage to the west would be sufficient for 100% of Dominion's needs, and 100% of the power coming from Dominion would be sufficient for the total development. So the long and short of it is, I would like to not build that substation there. I don't need to build that substation there, but it's contingent upon height. If we can get the height clearance of the 70-foot, then I can ensure it's commercially viable to look at developing something more sightly there. Although I don't think you will see the substation, and I think there's other examples of substation electrical infrastructure along Chandler, some that's masked, some that's not well masked by some simple, I guess, 18 to 20-foot pine trees. But yeah, I agree with you. I don't like it there either, and right now I don't have plans to build it there, even though that was what our conceptual plan did show.
Okay. The other question is, you claim 100% renewable energy across all your current and future locations. How do you accomplish that?
So again, it's in agreement with the utility providers today. So we rely on them to provide us the documents to that. It's a combination of, direct access to on-site renewables in some cases, but very few cases. A lot of time it's green energy purchasing contracts.
Okay, and so do you have any idea what the ratio of solar to wind to hydro is on those?
I don't, unfortunately.
Because I mean, you saying it is great, but it's a misnomer to the fact that all you're doing is purchasing the right to say this, not necessarily using only energy that was produced in a renewable fashion, because if it's mainly solar, you're not powering your data center at night, unless there's massive amounts of battery storage coming along with it. So it makes everybody believe that along with this is going to become renewed interest in trying to put even more solar developments on non-industrial zone land. And so that concerns me quite a bit.
I think I think your planning commissioner brought this up too. I mean, what you know about solar isn't a very realistic green energy solution for data centers, right? I mean, you know that.
Yeah.
So you asked the question about the point of origin or the generating factor of that. I don't know that I could even get that information if I asked for it from the utility. I certainly can try. But, I think you know as well as I know that solar is probably a minor contributor to that versus other factors of green energy.
It's just kind of misleading under the fact that.
It's what's available though, unless it's on-site generation, which
Yeah.
we don't say. I don't agree with you that, I mean, I agree with you that without dialogue, it could be misleading. That's not our intent. We're not trying to misrepresent. I think anyone who understands the energy industry understands that's what is available to consumers, unless you're self-generating. So we're not trying to be misleading. It's just that's what's available. And, I do think that, well, not a perfect solution, enhanced spending in that category perpetuates more positive green energy where it's not necessarily all positive, right?
Yeah. Okay, and so you've indicated now that the rear substation is going to be enough to power the facility at full build-out.
Correct.
So you are looking at more of a 300 megawatt vice the 600 you originally submitted?
No, the total planned, there's two substations. There's two Dominion 300 megawatt substations
Okay.
planned on the west side of the development.
So my concern with the number of buildings and the number of square feet you have, and the different types of tenants that can go into these, whether it's just a resident company, cloud computing, or you get into data mining. My concern is that we get data mining applications in these data centers and the power consumption just skyrockets, and we're gonna have to continually upgrade. We're gonna start having issues with possible power coming into the town. I mean, already where these data centers are going to suck up more power than the town 3, 4, 5 times over once the entire McDevitt Drive is built out. So that really is a concern of the fact that demanding up to 600 megawatts of power leads me to believe that it's more than just typical tenants that would be going in here, and that is a concern.
To be honest, the only conversations we've had with tenants are single occupiers for the entire campus. We don't have a deal yet because it's too mature to have a deal. There's certain goals, some that were discussed in length tonight, that are either attractive or unattractive factors to the tenant base. The only conversations we've had have been with single occupiers for the entire campus. And in fact, I think there's maybe one building, and it's a building that we don't even own any longer, that is multi-tenant.
Okay. And then at the Planning Commission, you mentioned about having, with the fire suppression, and I think one of the other supervisors is going to go into some of that kind of stuff, but you said you had a hydrant test that was pending to determine if you had enough water flow to even service that area in case of a fire for the appropriate pressure. Has that been conducted?
Tucker, our civil engineer, is in dialogues over that, so I'll invite Tucker.
We've had preliminary discussions with the Service Authority. I believe there's enough pressure to service this development. We've requested the flow test. We have not received those back yet.
Okay. So you still have a few things pending, and as well as I think there was another study that was still pending, historic site or indigenous, one of the survey type studies is still pending as well?
The archaeological phase 1.
Okay.
So the field work is complete with that. We've hired a firm, AAHA, I forget what the acronym stands for off the top of my head on the dais here, but all of their field work is complete. They're assembling their report. I don't think they had any major discoveries, but you always find small shards that have to be cataloged and studied, and a full report is pending. Our intent always was to submit that with the site plan process, which is typically within our process.
Okay. And have you guys looked at the surrounding, because we want this to be a technology park. McDevitt Drive is where we've determined this. And I want to make sure that we're doing it right and that we're doing it in a planned fashion so that 10 years down the road, people will drive down McDevitt Road and go, oh, okay, Culpeper did this right. It all looks uniform. It all looks nice. It doesn't look like it's been done piecemeal. Have you guys looked at some of the other data centers, like Swift is on that side, to see if we can get a similar look and feel? I know some of the applicants have also mentioned sidewalks. I know that Swift employees definitely enjoy walks afterwards. They frequent down around Germanna to kind of enhance that visual appeal of driving through McDevitt and ensuring that we kind of keep that quaint rural type, even though it is an industrial park.
So I think that we have a standard basis of design from architectural features that is modified continuously to meet increasingly aware demands for having something that's architecturally relevant and complementary to the surrounding area. Within our proffers, we've identified kind of a commitment to using, the biggest tactic is a diversification of facade materials that are relevant to make sure that you're breaking up some of those static boxes. That seems to be the biggest architectural concern that people have. Our buildings are set back several hundred feet from the road. I don't think you'll really see much of them, but obviously, you know, we're committed to those elevations that are visible and forward-facing, whether or not they're truly visible, but at least that we know the direction of where traffic can see them is to make sure that we're really enhancing those elements.
Yeah.
It's kind of early in the process for that. That really happens in kind of the building permit, building design.
Right.
And as far as the site planning, we hadn't really thought about a sidewalk or things of that nature, mostly because we're trying to preserve existing vegetation in the buffer, and we're trying to have as minimal impact as necessary. It wouldn't be a major impact, but the wetlands that run mostly through the town parallel to McDevitt are pretty close to the road, and with DEQ standards, they want 35 feet of setback from any disturbance, and so there would be pinch points where we would actually probably have to take more environmental impacts if we were doing that. We can certainly talk about that in site plan. We're not opposed to it. We just didn't think it would be a utilized asset, and we didn't want to take unnecessary wetland impacts that we didn't have to take, especially to put something in that might not be utilized. But if it's something that you think could be utilized or would be utilized by the community, we can certainly talk about it to the same extent that the request we got this morning from VDOT. You know, I'm not going to grandstand and say it's a great effort for me to contribute that 0.3 acre corner to you. It's not, and I'm happy to do it, and it's absolutely, you know, I'm great. Nothing would give me more pleasure than to do that, because it's easy for me, and I'm not going to pretend like it's not. So, you know, we have our full commitment that we will absolutely, you know, convey that or do whatever is necessary to make sure that VDOT has the right space. Likewise, you know, VDOT has an appraiser coming sometime this month to help work through what requirement they have on us at the intersection of McDevitt and Route 3 as well, for the same purposes.
Okay. Yeah, because I know there is already a sidewalk on that side for a few feet between Swift and Germanna, so. Okay, I think that's it for me.
Thank you.
I got nothing.
I'd like to circle back to the substation.
Sure.
I think I heard you say that the height of the building would determine whether or not you would need a substation there. Can you explain that?
Absolutely, I'm happy to. So I understand that there was the potential for an ordinance to increase the height restrictions or the height allowances in this particular zoning category in the county. I understand that it recently did not meet a successful vote, but that it might be coming back again. I would much rather put a more attractive building on that intersection of anything than a substation, but with the current height restrictions, it really limits what building is possible there. What the town allows in its current code today is 70 foot. That's what we've asked for. If we're allowed to do 70 foot, you know, then we can use that land for a building versus a substation. Without that height, it really restricts some of the building types that we could do.
So you're saying if you can go higher, you will need more acreage, more square feet of land? And if you go lower, you don't need that extra square feet?
No.
I'm not following you.
What I'm saying is with the height restriction that the county has, which I believe is 45 feet, help me if I'm speaking out of turn, it limits the options of what we could build there from the standpoint of a building, whereas the substation is, you know, at its highest point is really about 15 feet in most cases. So if we have that higher height limit for building restriction, it allows me the versatility to put in a commercially generating building versus a substation that at this point we don't actually need.
I think what he may be saying is that the highest and best use, if we have a 45-foot height limit, is a substation.
That's a smarter way to say it, thank you.
Okay.
But you just said a few minutes ago, you didn't want a substation here. You had another place you could put a substation, and it wasn't your plan to put a substation there. And now you're saying that you're gonna put the substation in the county because of the height restriction that we have on the buildings. So which is it?
we want to make efficient use of the property, so. we're
So the
intent to
substation would
build
be
it.
at that corner where it's located on this map?
It's a viable ask that we're asking for, yes. But,
Well, that's not what you just told Ms. Gugino here a minute ago.
I think we want to keep the versatility open. You know, if we, without the extra added height, there's not a lot more that I can build there except a substation. I don't need a substation today. I'm not in conversations with Rappahannock to build a substation. They would like me to build a substation there. I have no use for that substation. So there's zero plans today that I have to actually build a substation there. However, we've drawn that to be transparent and realistic and to communicate that today, that's really all we could do there.
Mr. Chairman, following up, I too am not, I have reservations about if there were to be a substation on that corner. In response to your comment of having a 70-foot high building like the town already has authorized, is that a total height, or are you going to add another 15 on top of that for your mechanicals?
So the actual basis we have today is about 63 foot, not 70 foot, but yeah, that is top of building line, not mechanical line. But mechanicals would be 12-foot setback, screened, et cetera.
So you could get by with 75 feet total height, 63 plus 15 be, well, 78 is what?
For certain tenants that we're speaking to, yes, not for all tenants. It does limit our commercial viability to the entire pool of tenancy.
My concern, and as Ms. Gugino has asked previously about the flow test, if, you know, and I understand is, the way I understand it, if there's any infrastructure improvements that need to be made to increase the amount of water, that would be on the applicant or the end user yourself. That said, if it's marginal, are you planning maybe a cistern or something for fire suppression? And this is what my questions allude to, because
Sure.
our fire department, and it's greatly appreciated, the proffer that you're throwing out there, $480,000. But do keep in mind that a ladder truck, and this is the reason that this topic was kicked back from rules, is as a full volunteer organization in our county, our fire departments have to raise this money. And when you look at $478,400, and a ladder truck right now is about $1.3 million. And we don't have the equipment right now to fight a fire on an 85-foot tall structure, meaning 70 feet plus another 15 feet of mechanical. So that's my concern. And you know, I'm not going to put even more burden, and believe you me, they would greatly appreciate every, you know, penny that's been proffered. But I don't want to put extra burden on them that now they've got to fundraise more, because we're getting ready to put 2 million square feet of 85-foot tall buildings up.
Sure. So I've had preliminary dialogues with Chief Mills, Kenny Mills. He's setting up some future sessions that we just haven't been able to schedule yet with Deputy Chief Perriman, Junior Perriman, so we can kind of talk through how do we do a comprehensive life safety and training program. So it's something that you're used to doing and helping volunteer firefighters understand what is that program. The monetary contribution is, of course, to aid in that materiality of the equipment and the supplies that they need to do that. The 70-foot height allowance already exists, though, in the town. So that's, our development predominantly is already coveted by that. So what we really want to do is make sure that we're contributing in the way we can to help with the materiality of how they fight, but also in the education of how they fight, which includes sitting down now and looking at the architectural design of the building. So we have committed and discussed already that we would be doing architectural page turns with them to discuss egress and access to the building. We've talked about annual site tours and on-site training weeks with the volunteer force, that we could re-educate them on a regular basis and make sure they have 24/7 access to the facility managers. But we also think what's really important is peer-to-peer training, as we understand, the benefit of also having, a volunteer force that might have firefighting experience in other counties like Loudoun that has come in handy in the past. We want to make sure that that's not a happy circumstance, but that's by design. So we've also talked about how do we bring in peer-to-peer training from other fire department groups that support that. So I know the question was really around the equipment to support that, but that is unfortunately, that's an open challenge that we have to work together to solve because that exists already today, the opportunity for that. My commitment is it's beyond just a monetary contribution, but it really is an education and a culture of purveying safety with the entire volunteer force, not just from our own resources, but in collaboration with other fire departments as well.
Well, keep in mind that we've already had a data center fire in Culpeper, and it was a pretty eye-opening experience for a volunteer fire and rescue.
Yeah,
And
they-
going forward, and being on Public Safety Committee, I've vowed that I won't support anything that is going to endanger our volunteers or leave them shorthanded when it comes to the equipment they need to protect life and property. So to go back, you're saying in the town, the total height is 70, but they are also allowing 15 on top, so that's 85 feet is how tall these buildings will be with mechanicals on top. Is that right?
I believe that's correct. Yes. I believe that's correct, yes.
Thank you.
Well, I, for one, Mr. Cook, appreciate y'all coming to Culpeper and trying to do business in Culpeper. And there's good points that have been made tonight, but in some ways, I'm a little disappointed with how we have conveyed them to you in certain cases from a passion standpoint. And everybody has passion about growth in Culpeper. Nobody wants to see Northern Virginia in Culpeper. But there's reasons on both sides to why we need technology in this area, because this is our technology-zoned area for Culpeper. And I know there's passion both ways, but as far as me conveying my message to you, I want to make sure that you understand that we appreciate the Peterson Group coming to Culpeper and being interested in Culpeper and the potential user that you have in place. So with that, I'll open it up to more comments before I open the public hearings, or is there any other questions that you have for Mr. Cook and his team?
No other questions. I appreciate the comments of the board, the questions, and look forward to getting through the process. Thank you to everyone.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, this issue involves a public hearing, so I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing now for anybody who would like to come and speak. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Deezy Campbell, and I live in Stevensburg, right across the highway from all this data center technology zone. I'm really concerned about the water issue. I've talked to Adam a little bit about it and taking notes again today. Concerned about water runoff drainage, especially from an unnamed tributary that runs through the site with numerous outfall points along the way, and it all flows to Mountain Run just west of the bridges over 29, at which point our farm is on the right. My other concern is, in Chapter 4 of our recently adopted comprehensive plan, Goal 1, increase the county's role in environmental and historical stewardship. I take issue with this blanket statement. There are no, and this is in the document that they've submitted, there are no environmentally sensitive or historic areas in or nearby. Was an archaeological study done, and I heard tonight that they're working on it. The railroad was put in 1854 from Manassas to Gordonsville, and there's probably a lot of history involved, campsites during the Civil War. Since Culpeper was occupied, swapped back and forth between the blue and the gray in 8 separate military engagements from March 1862 to May of 1864. And actually, the Battle of Culpeper Courthouse was fought September 13th, 1863. So there is history in this area, and I'd like to see that documented in your proposal. I'm wondering if there's such a thing as a LEED certified data center. We want the best if we want it in Culpeper, in my opinion. I want data centers to not grow to 85 feet. Culpeper is a low, I don't know what you call it, but the towers over, the silos over at the flour mill, they're 100 feet, and that would set a precedent in this area, going so high. I wonder if there'd be safety precautions put in place for possible fuel spills, and will the fuel tanks be put behind spill containment structures, or whatever you call them, and will backup generators also be separated likewise? I sent all of you an article last night from one of the very best journals that I like to read every month. Data centers may be near tipping point in Northern Virginia, and it mentions environmental costs, increased stormwater runoff from buildings, parking lots, air pollution from backup generators, and visual upgrades to the power line that runs to Culpeper. All of it runs straight through our farm, and that would certainly affect our family and our neighborhood. In the Bay Journal article, it said that some scientists are working on data storage that uses less space, such as synthetic DNA, while others are using lasers to etch into silica instead of cobalt and lithium. So new technology is on the horizon, and smaller can be better. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anybody else that would like to come and speak tonight? Okay. If not, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. Open it up for discussion.
Discussion? Okay. With a lot of the stuff that has been stated and the fact of the matter that the plan still contains a substation that we were told tonight in more ways than one is not needed and not necessary, and with the fact that there's still clarification on the archaeological study and the flow testing to whether or not there's going to be additional on-site water storage, and the issue of the maximum height limit from 45 to 75 feet, which I believe is going to be in increased discussions, that I move for a continuance until, for 30 days to have them time to address those issues.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Yes, sir. I'm not going to support the motion for a continuance. I believe that there is a process. This process is primarily driven by the town. Yes, there is a component for the county. That's why we're here. That said, we have a responsible company with a responsible plan, and we are a secondary component of this. The Planning Commission has recommended approval 6-2. I'm confident things will be worked out in a way that would be beneficial for the community, so I would prefer to go ahead and approve. There are many more steps to this process, and I think we'd be doing the community a favor by approving.
Well, I certainly support the project, and I truly believe we're going to get through this process. Ms. Gugino brought up some good points, and she is the supervisor of that district, which carries a lot of weight. So I will support her motion, but at the same time, knowing, want to convey it to your team that I do believe we'll get through this process.
Mr. Chairman, I think that the area where this is proposed is the area where we want to see data center development. And I support that. I don't support a substation on the corner of Chandler and McDevitt. And I kind of feel like you're holding that over my head, saying, give me 70 feet or get a substation. And I don't like that alternative. I think you have some more homework to do, and I think it can be done. I support this in concept, but I think there's some more things that need to be answered before I want to see this move forward.
And I would like to make a clarification of the motion, instead of 30 days for our July meeting, since our July meeting is more than 30 days from now. But I also do want to say, I do support data centers in this area. This is where they need to be. I just want to make sure that we do it right, because I lived on the 28 corridor. I saw Ashburn happen. I saw all of these go up. I'm watching Prince William do the same thing, and I just want to make sure that we are doing this to the best of our ability and making sure that it is exactly right for our community.
Mr. Chairman, with the comment, I would really like to have more official input from the president of the association, Fire Association, and get more of his. My vote is going to weigh heavily on their input. And again,
Well, Mr. Bates, can I suggest you as chairman of our Public Safety Committee and Mr. Cook and Mr. Perryman meet?
I'm all for that, yes, sir.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign?
Aye.
Okay, we have 5-1 in favor, not in favor of the, favor of continuance, yes. And Mr. Underwood is not in favor. Thank you. Okay, moving on, request by Sturgeon Trucking for a conditional use permit to allow the construction and operation of a trucking facility with outdoor storage. And I'll turn this over to our planning team again, Neil Drumheller.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I'll read into the record the Planning Commission letter. The Board of Supervisors will consider a request by Roger Sturgeon of Sturgeon Trucking for a conditional use permit to allow the construction and operation of a trucking facility with outdoor storage per Article 7.1-2-3.5, Article 7.1A-2-3.6, and in accordance with Article 17, use permits of the zoning ordinance. The use is also located along an entrance overlay corridor district, and Article 30-3-2.2 requires the proposed use to acquire a special use permit in accordance with this article as well. The property is currently zoned LI, Light Industrial, and is located on the corner of James Madison Highway and Brandy Road in the Stevensburg Magisterial District. It's found on tax map 42, parcel 68A. The case was considered by the Planning Commission after proper advertising and public hearing held on Wednesday, May 10th, 2023. The Planning Commission found the request to be in conformance with Article 7.1A-2-3.5 and Article 7.1A-2-3.6 of the zoning ordinance and in accordance with Article 17. Upon motion duly carried, the Planning Commission recommends to the Board of Supervisors by an 8-0 vote that the proposed use permit be approved with the following conditions, and there are 5. Number 1, the proposed use shall be limited to areas as proposed on the generalized development plan dated March 27th, 2023, drawn by Sullivan, Donahoe, and Ingalls, as submitted by the applicant. The use in any forthcoming site plan shall remain in substantial conformance with this concept plan. Number 2, operations shall not commence until a site plan in accordance with Article 20 of the zoning ordinance has been approved. Number 3, the proposed use shall not commence operation until VDOT has approved the existing entrance or any future entrance improvements as required by VDOT in conjunction with the site plan approval. The permit holder shall provide evidence to the zoning administrator prior to the commencement of VDOT's approval and acceptance of any required entrance improvements. Number 4, any forthcoming site plan shall consider and implement provisions and recommendations as outlined in the Soil and Water Conservation District letter dated April 25th, 2023. Number 5, all buffering and screening must be installed in a manner acceptable to the zoning administrator. Sincerely, Sanford Reeves, Jr.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this is what I would call a dual use permit. It's one application, but it's a dual use permit request that the board is looking at or tasked to look at for this particular proposal. The property that's shaded in red on the map is the parcel that the applicant is looking to use for truck terminal or storage parking area. And they would access with an internal street there right off of Brandy Road. The large area of blue, I'll just point that out right now, is a 100-year FEMA floodplain. They will stay well outside of that and use the bulk of the property there tight to the interchange in Brandy Road. The rest of that would remain undeveloped. The applicant did propose, as was read into the record as far as a condition, not the applicant proposed it, but the applicant drafted a concept plan that the Planning Commission has recommended the board adopt as a condition of approval. And staff would recommend that as well. I just wanted to point out that concept plan or that exhibit has been revised. That the revised concept plan and exhibit was posted to board docs. I don't know that it was redated. That's why that March 27th date is still in there, but it does have some changes since the Planning Commission has reviewed it. So the entrance has been moved further back, which was a recommendation from VDOT as far as the internal entrance off of Brandy Road. Landscaping along Brandy Road and the interchange there for Route 29 has been implemented and has been changed. The applicant does propose currently a triple row of variety of evergreens along that up to the floodplain and then around the corner there from the on-ramp to 29 back towards Brandy along Brandy Road there. Staff has looked at this as well as the agencies, VDOT, Soil and Water Conservation District. Both VDOT and the Soil and Water Conservation District did pass along some recommendations. Many of those would be looked at actually with any future site plan that would come in if the use permit is approved. VDOT did propose some potential changes, and the applicant is already aware of those, and as I mentioned, incorporated some of those into the concept plan that's been developed. This area does have, as far as area character, you do have a mix of usage in the area, but it is zoned light industrial currently. This is not a rezoning request. This is a use permit request. Just to the east of the proposal, you do see car storage today. I point that out because when that use came through a few years ago or several years ago at this point, there was a fence that was incorporated along Route 29, and that was actually a reuse of that site. Staff is concerned that a triple row of evergreens, while it will certainly help mitigate the view shed along a pretty primary interchange, that maybe a fence with landscaping could be a little bit better to do the job. And that's really in response to Article 30, which is our entrance corridor overlay district. And that doesn't prohibit the use from occurring, it just helps to mitigate the enhancement of that architectural corridor that's been designated. The use permit side of things, when you get to the light industrial zoning, this use is not a by right use. Truck terminals are listed as a conditional use, and that's why the applicant, again, had to apply for a conditional use permit. And that way, we're looking at public health, safety, and welfare issues with Article 17, which is your normal Article 17 standards. When you look at the comprehensive plan, it is supported, and that's one of the standards for Article 17. The comprehensive plan does show this as industrial or commercial. This is certainly an industrial or commercial use. When it comes to public safety, we do have a fairly wide entrance. The entrance is well established. This property has been used historically for industrial purposes. We've had storage uses on the property in the past. As far as safety, they could potentially enhance that entrance a little bit, and VDOT would look at that closer with any forthcoming site plan. But that is something that would need to be considered tonight for the conditional use permit as well. The economic benefits, Sturgeon Trucking actually is located in the county today. I believe they're right down the street, and they're looking to expand to this potential location here. Our comprehensive plan does talk about supporting existing businesses that are in the county for economic expansion, and that is one goal that I believe Sturgeon Trucking does have today. Mr. Chairman, I'll leave it with this, and Mr. Furnival and his group are here, and they can answer questions as well for the applicant. Staff is comfortable with the application, and with one hesitation, and that's pointed out in the board's memo that I issued earlier. I believe that at a minimum, and when you look at Article 30, what we've done with other businesses along this corridor, that the landscape buffer that's provided, again, that triple row of evergreen is a minimum to be considered at this location. When the Planning Commission was considering this, we looked at simple Google Earth images. When you drive this corridor, you can see onto this site pretty easily when you're on 29 north or south, and especially as you're getting onto 29 coming from Culpeper. There is a little bit of vegetation when you get back towards the floodplain that will help on that portion of the view shed. I believe the project could be supported a little bit better with at least, the applicant has looked at berming. I don't know if they've considered fencing or not yet, but those types of measures could help at this location. It's not going to conceal it at this location. It's right at street level, if not sitting a little bit down below street level at certain points. So it is going to be visible. But things like that will help mitigate that view shed, which I believe is the goal of Article 30. But that's the only hesitation, Mr. Chairman, that staff has right now, and that's regarding the view shed component of this request. We'd be happy to answer any questions, but the applicant is here that can address those questions further.
Well, first of all, as far as questions for staff, I'll start out with that before we get to the applicant. Thank you for being here today, sir. I'll piggyback on Article 30 because we've talked about this. I think we've made a couple mistakes in the last 6 or 7 years as far as the buffer types in our entrance corridor district, where people are seeing Culpeper, and I think it's not a nominal mistake; it's a major mistake. I mean, I think we need to try as much to screen industrial properties as much as we can. I mean, to protect the view shed of people coming into Culpeper. And I don't know how we do that. I don't know if you have any specifics that you can share, Sam, with what your vision is when you mentioned other approaches, but I think it's something that we should be looking at going forward to change some things with our buffer types.
Mr. Chairman, we have a varied experience, especially along Route 29, as far as what has been done to help mitigate view shed. We've seen large berms, which you see closer towards Remington, Elkwood area there, tight up against the railroad track, so that's quite a substantial berm. Landscaping on top does not work for that particular situation, but the berm does help mitigate. As I mentioned, right next door, that landowner did put up, I believe it's a 10-foot, 12-foot, actually, opaque board on-board fencing, in addition to some evergreen plantings that were already there. That did help with that particular use, in my opinion, when that went up. You go further down 29, you have simple landscaping only, and that's what the applicant's currently proposing as far as a view shed. That works, but it takes time. The applicant did have potentially a berm. A berm at this location potentially could help, but it is going to eat into the usable area for that property. So that is something to consider. That's why a fence may work better here. Also, you have headlights to consider as well, and a fence may work better for that as well for trucks. So those are just some considerations, but we do have a varied, and we have not, Mr. Chairman, to your credit, you've been mentioning this for years, but we have not taken beyond our landscape ordinance. It has not been further revised to add certain buffer types or berming types or anything like that. It is left up through the process currently still, so.
And I don't want to impact the applicant's project, but, you know, we've been talking about quality projects, and, you know, I just think the screening part is very important. But opening up for questions, comments?
I think truck terminals are beautiful, and I don't like berms.
And I have some concern with the whole conversation with the entrance overlay and berms and screening and all of this kind of stuff. We're not talking about major industrial players that have millions of dollars to be able to construct these very expensive screening applications. We have a bunch of small businesses owned by people who want to live, work, and play in Culpeper. And honestly, it almost feels like we're trying to hide the unsightly side of Culpeper. Culpeper is a blue-collar town. We have a lot of industrial activities going on. And I mean, the inlet area has been, I think, over-scrutinized, and the Bragg's Corner area has been well under-scrutinized when it comes to this kind of screening. I mean, you go into other areas, and yeah, a lot of their entrances are industrial because it's right off the highway. It's easy access. So we got to be careful on saying we have to shield and berm and landscape all of this stuff, because we could be pushing out really good members of the community. And I just want to keep that in mind as we start talking about additional screening for some of this stuff. Overall, I'm in support of, I mean, we've said that this has been utilized as a trucking depot before, and I support the application.
Okay, anybody else?
When it comes to screening, Mr. Chairman, I agree with the comments that have been made that it's a small business, but again, this is Culpeper. We're trying to, you don't have a second chance to make a first impression. But I think that the real issue here is we go off of the screening ordinance that we have in play, and I think I'd like to lean more to a maintenance thing to make sure that these plantings make it to maturity. And should they make it to maturity, in fact, if we look at where, Mr. Chairman, on the Country Club Lane, where those trees, I mean, that they were tended to until they reached a height, and you don't even know that it's back there. So I think that's a key component in, maintaining these plantings until they reach that point. But again, as a small business owner, I don't know that, going with berms and that sort of thing would help in that situation. I don't think that would be the route to take. But overall, I do support the request.
Okay. Would you like to address the board, sir?
My name's Rick Furnival. I live in Rixieville in Mr. Rosenberg's district, but I'm representing the client for Solomon, Donahoe, and Ingalls. And I appreciate the comments that the board has made. The original proposal that we had a berm and a double row of trees behind the berm, and there was a considerable amount of discussion at the Planning Commission about the screening issue and a discussion about maybe putting the trees on top of the berm, and we made the comment that when you put a tree on top of a berm, it doesn't have the ability to sustain its roots as well, and it can be a problem, so we didn't really think that was desirable. So instead, we took away the berm and made the triple row of trees, and we are indicating them in a planting spacing that is pretty dense, and I think it will provide a very nice screen after a fairly short amount of time. And we could certainly specify with the site plan a certain minimum caliper tree that would be appropriate. One benefit to us for removing the berm, looking at the way this site is going to be graded, it's going to be a very minimal amount of land disturbance, and there's no opportunity to mine dirt on site to build the berm. So it would all have to be trucked in. That's a much higher expense than moving it around on site. And so, we certainly, we've been trying to address this screening issue because we've been told since we started the process that it was a critical element to address. And I do feel like this mixed species of evergreen trees planted at appropriate density will provide a nice buffer that will be a visual screen, and I think it'll probably be an improvement over some of the other buffers in that corridor that I've seen because they're not planted that closely together. I think also our new plan shows an adjustment to the site entrance off of the access road based on VDOT's comments, and we also showed additional paving that Mr. Drumheller indicated was required as part of the site plan. We wanted to go ahead and show that on the plan as well. So we certainly intend to address all the comments that the various regulators have put forth and with the site plan. And if you have any other questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Furnival.
Certainly.
All right, this issue requires a public hearing, so I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing for anybody that would like to come and speak. Okay, seeing none, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and open it up for discussion or a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the case U2239-23-1 for a conditional use permit to allow the construction and operation of a trucking facility with outdoor storage, utilizing the draft resolution of approval as posted on board docs.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. All right. Entertain a motion to adjourn. We're adjourned.